Patrick Lawler, as some of you heard in our informal greetings to one another, visited us 11 years ago. And I sort of believe it because when I was writing a department memo, I guesstimated, I said 10 to 12 years, and I thought, well, I better look and see how long it was, and it was 11. So at least I had a sense, but when I really think about 11 years, wow, it's just an amazing amount of time that has gone by. What remains with me, though, after those 11 years, beyond all the wonderful things that have happened in our lives, our joint lives together as poets and readers, is that people still come up to me and they say, have you heard from Patrick Lawler? And I say, hopefully not. No, I don't say that. But people actually remember the reading. We're really gifted to have you return to us, and I'm so glad that you have. Patrick Lawler, for those of you who don't know, he's a lifelong resident, of Central New York. He was born in Jordan and has lived in the Syracuse area that entire time. And he is a very dedicated teacher. I've had an opportunity to visit him in Syracuse and meet his students and colleagues, and everyone speaks so glowingly of his work there. So he's very dedicated to not only reading poetry, but bringing his work to people and to fostering and mentoring people. I'm not going to list his book titles because most, if not all of his books, the bookstore has gotten in for us, and they're back there. I would encourage you to look at them. And but I would like to say, I would like to read the very beginning, at least, of a blurb that is a crazy blurb for his book, Feeding the Fear of the Earth, which begins, Patrick Lawler is a madman. And I particularly like this blurb, not only because I wrote it, but because it really typifies for me Patrick Lawler's work. There's this kind of, you have probably heard the term crazy wisdom before, and there's this idea, this concept that when we receive really deep teachings that nourish us, it can seem a kind of looniness to them, but there's a deepness to those. And this is, Patrick, how I've always felt about your work. On one level, it's extraordinarily humorous and witty, and yet it's never frivolous or gratuitous to me. It's a wise kind of madness. So I'm going to stop and don't say too much before I try to take care of that noise. Just stand up here and look uncomfortable or something for a few minutes. But to lessen that lack of comfort, I'd like to ask everyone to join me in welcoming Patrick Lawler.
So for the first poem I'd like to read, and I'm going to read a lot from this book. It's my most recent book, Child Sings in the Womb. I'll talk a little bit about that title later on. The first poem I'm going to read from it is actually the last poem in the book. And it's a poem about death and love and emails. And all of this poem is true, even the parts I wish that weren't. Here goes. Dearest Akeem Benedicta is the title of the poem. Dearest Akeem, thank you for your email explaining your dire situation, the death of your father, the $9.5 million, your request for my private bank account information in order to transfer the funds to my account, and your generous offer of 5% for being the guardian of the bank account. Thank you for trusting me. Dearest Akeem, today I received a letter from the president of the college where I work. It says, I was saddened to learn about the death of your father. I am shocked to learn my father has died again. I write to express my sincere condolences on this occasion to you and your family. I check the internet and see that an Edward Lawler has died, surviving is a son, Patrick. I see that Edward has died at exactly the same age as my father and at exactly the same VA hospital, except 20 years later. I am assured that I am in the college president's prayers. I don't believe I have ever been in his prayers before, and quite frankly, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Dearest Akeem, these are catastrophic times. craziness all over the place, many unexpected deaths, some double deaths. Oh, it is good to know that someone like you lives in the world. Dearest Akeem, I once had a psychotic student in a summer class. I'm not using the word in a pejorative way, more like a term of honor. See Saz. In my first class, he stood up and started reading a story about his father, how his father picked him up from school, and although his father was speaking in a foreign language, he knew he meant to do him harm. My student said he grabbed the steering wheel and tried to kick his father out the door. Because it was a creative writing class, it took me several weeks before I realized he was psychotic. I think if he were taking a class in theoretical physics or in philosophy, no one would have ever suspected. Dearest Akeem, exactly what is 5% of $9.5 million? I'm thinking of my future purchases. Dearest Akeem, today I receive a mass card from the chaplain at the college. I decide this has gone too far. But why should I apologize for having only one dead father? Dearest Akeem, I read your email over and over. Sometimes I feel like I am living inside your head. I feel my brain turning into a radio, and all these thoughts wind up on the shores of the Ivory Coast. My tonsils like broken wind chimes with your words flowing over them. Sometimes I feel like I'm gnawing on a piece of electricity. Dearest Akeem, I just figured out what 5% of $9.5 million is. Thank you, thank you, thank you 475,000 times. Dearest Akeem, I sought the psychotic student out for conversation after class. So what did you do this weekend? You know, he said, I was listening to the professor of musicology on the radio. You were interviewing him. That was when I decided to follow the psychotic student home. I wanted to see how he lived. He once asked me, do you ever feel like you are turning into a bee? Afterwards, a person from continuing ed at the college asked me, do you think he is paranoid schizophrenic? I said, well, he didn't used to be until I started following him. Dearest Akeem, I want to say to the officials at the college, where were you when my real father died? But that seems petulant and a bit absurd since I wasn't even working at the college 20 years ago. We all can use as many condolences as possible, even if these aren't our times of need. I don't know how to tell them the truth about how their kindnesses, even though not entirely deserved, are not going unnoticed. Dearest Akeem, dearest one, I know this will come as a surprise, but the more I read your email, the more I display a deep affection toward you and your generosity. Now I must solicit your deepest confidence. This is by virtue of its nature as being utterly confidential. When I was following the psychotic student home, I wasn't sure it was still him. For all I knew it could have been my father, and now even yours. Thomas Saz says, if you talk to God, you are praying. If God talks to you, you have schizophrenia. I wonder what it would be like to follow God, just to see to whom he was really talking. Dearest Akeem, on my way to my appointment with my psychologist, I once thought of suicide. Then I thought about how if you cancel your appointment, you have to let him know 24 hours in advance, or you get charged. That made me mad, and then I realized that anger can provide a very powerful motivation to live. Dearest Akeem, please be patient to peruse my proposal soliciting your noble assistance. It gives me great trust, confidentiality, and enthusiasm. You asked me to provide my private bank account information, but at this time, presently, I will need to open one. I believe there will be no suspicion if I open it for $475,000. If you could be of my service, I would appreciate it. Could you provide your credit card identifiable information so I can open the bank account for which you can benefit? Dearest Akeem, A woman I know was preparing for a bachelorette party. She asked for a male stripper. The agency thought she asked for a man with a big clock. Time is the ultimate subject, time and sex. I am sorry. I should have had two fathers, one dead and the other alive. Maybe everyone should have two fathers, the one they love and the one they hate. I will have to follow this Edward Lawler home, find out how he lived, discover my lost sister. Dearest Akeem, the problem with my second dead father was that he was kind of distant, remote, if you will. It is a terrible grief to have two dead fathers. I think I may have crossed a line when I looked into the window of the psychotic student. The house was a fairly normal suburban house with a neat lawn, but I had to see how he lived. I walked up to the window that appeared to look into his kitchen. When I peered in, I saw something terrible. Dearest Akeem, I hope my emails are following you to the Ivory Coast, to your village, to the sad part of your heart where your father is still dying. That old urge to follow a stranger has returned. Tonight, for example, I followed a stranger to a room where people are reading poetry. I will follow him home when the reading is finished. There is a feeling of exhilaration. I don't know where his life will lead me. Dearest Akeem, do not let my new love for you influence this transaction. I cannot forgive myself that I was not there for you when your father died. I would have called him my third father, and I would have had emotions toward his bank officials. Kindly accept my undying interest in what you can offer me. Dearest Akeem, suppose the person you are following commits suicide. What are your responsibilities? Suppose it is too late to cancel any appointments. Dearest Akeem, at the end of the semester, the psychotic student stood up at his desk and thanked the class. He gave me a book on bees. The card that accompanied it said, "Thank you for listening to me." Dearest Akeem, am I following you now? Will we lie in each other's electrical entanglements? Will our heartbeats be synchronized? Dearest Akeem, time follows us. What is a man to do who has two dead fathers? I want to say, when I grow up, I will be a bird. When my father died the second time, I was doubly sad. At the funeral, there was a naked man with a big clock, and he was not crying. Dearest Akeem, there are many truths, and some of them are false. I followed the coffin of my first dead father and wound up staring into the grave of my second dead father. Dearest Akeem, right now I'm in a room full of about 25 people, and I'm going to pass around a sheet of paper, and I will ask them for their names and private bank accounts. I did not attend the funeral of my second dead father. It seems somewhat redundant. I am thinking of sending you a book about bees. Thank you for listening to me. How hard it is to find the right person to follow, and how easy it is to step out of this world and into a new one. Dearest Akeem. So, I think all of that, unfortunately, is true. Just about all of it. Yeah. So, I'm going to read a poem now. Kind of about, about maybe being amazed, and it's about my mother. So I keep this. That's called Dear Bose-Einstein condensate. Okay, if you don't know what that is, you will hear a little bit about that. Yes, what is it?
Bose. Oh, okay. Einstein.
Well, you said that was one of your favorite poems.
It was.
To put you on the spot.
For my research, I think you're writing about your mother and her Alzheimer's, and then you do thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite part of that poem is section 11 or section 12. You have no thoughts.
There's no thoughts.
And I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
that's
really
great.
great.
That's great. There is a section in this, and it's divided in 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And I will not break it up with the numbers, etc. That will interfere too much, I think, with the poem. But there is one section where there is nothing, nothing. And it is section 11. Yeah, yeah, so you were good. And that's kind of part of the poem in a way, arriving at that space where there's space.
Almost like you had not been here for 11 years.
Exactly. Dear Bose-Einstein condensate, I keep this in mind. Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells that are in a constant state of renewal. Our taste buds only last a few hours and then are replaced. About 1% of our cells are replaced each day. About every 3 months, we get a new body. I don't know who I'll be the next time we meet. Maybe I'm just speeding up the process or maybe slowing it down so we can become more attentive to the transformations. It is hard to know who we are. I didn't tell you I changed my name to Robert Bly. Later on tonight, you can say, I heard Robert Bly reading, but you know he wasn't that great, and he asked me to call him Bob. It didn't seem right. My mother has just been evaluated for Alzheimer's. Things do not look good. She is cold and shivering. I've been thinking about the Bose-Einstein condensate, which seems odd at this time. A state of matter cooled to near absolute zero. I look at my mother shivering, and I'm thinking about hope. My therapist's parents had to be really screwed up. I mean, why would anyone who had a healthy level of self-esteem, anyone who wasn't riddled with neuroses and doubt and repression and fear, possibly sit there for 50 minutes focusing on me? Of course, I don't mean you. I mean, you're not getting paid for this. There is a woman right now in this room with whom I intend to make love. She doesn't know it yet. Sex will shake us to our erotic roots. Fire will spill from our openings. I don't want to scare her, but here's a question. Does a person with multiple personality disorder have a therapist for each personality? In group therapy, I look around and I am alone. I think the woman who I intended to make love to has just left the room. Just a minor setback to our mutual pursuit of ecstasy. When I get my mother's a cup of coffee, I am on the elevator. A man with a big, bulging head stands next to me. I am shocked. His head is the size of 2.5 heads, the size of a beer belly, the size of a baby platypus. I'm not sure, but I think this is what happens when the head is overly full of memories. And they push against the inner walls of the skull, and they keep pushing until they dent the head, until they pop it out like a banged kettle. I changed my name to Mark Strand. Okay, I'm currently Joy Harjo. The woman I wanted to make love to must have been confused. I am sure she is having second thoughts about her departure. Can you imagine our lovemaking? Oh, beautiful the place where we first woke up, the place where we will wake up again. Oh, powerful wings that carry our burdens. We are tuning forks, picking up the vibrational frequency of the other, our navels spark. I once knew a woman who said she was interested in a threesome, but she wasn't very good at math. When I'm alone, I practice not being a selfish lover. Light moves at 186,000 miles per second, except when moving through a Bose-Einstein condensate. Then it is like crawling through a speed trap in a remote speck of a town. I didn't tell you I changed my name to Adrienne Rich. Later on, you will say that you heard Adrienne Rich read, but she really didn't seem to be herself. I wear my name tag, the false self. My inner child was adopted by a dysfunctional family. I am an experiment. I can't wait to see how it turns out. My yearnings mask my desires mask my cravings. I am part cracked mask, part rearing horse, part whittled flute. I don't know who I'll be later this evening. Hi, I'm a PC. Hi, I'm a Mac. Just ignore the W.S. Merwin name tag. He has asked me to wear it. The woman who left this reading must be thinking how we could have started a fire at the molecular level, how we could have made love until our insides were crystal. I bring my mom the cup of coffee to warm her while we are waiting to see if she will remember me later. I recognize my problem. I have too much memory, like the man with the big head in the elevator. I have scrubbed the bottom of my brain. Here, Mom, take some of mine. Here's what amazes me. Scientists have succeeded in halting light by directing it into a Bose-Einstein condensate. This is what happened when time moves into my mother's brain, a cup of condensed electricity. I don't give a shit about being a poet, but I do care deeply about poetry, for its ability to freeze time. I'll ride the elevator into the sky with the man with the gigantic head, and my mother whose head is getting lighter all the time, and the woman who recently left this room in search of someone she will make love to, someone with a Robert Pinsky name tag who asks her to call her Bob. I wish her luck in the night full of brain cells, of lit brain cells, a whole roaring festival of cell renewal. In the end, with creating or loving or dying, we're doing the same thing, slowing down light until it's almost at a standstill. This is what happens in sex and poetry and dying. We approach an absolute zero, and our bodies and our brains become vessels of slowed light. Thank you. This is, the title of the book is Child Sings in the Womb, okay? And these were titles, there were a whole section of poems here that were inspired by the headlines in tabloid newspapers. I'll just tell you like a few. Crowd of 1,500 see Jesus inside ancient Italian church. Spies lurk among us from ancient planets. Embalmed bodies used as dummies in storefront windows. Okay, this kind of thing. For probably about a year, I would go to our local drugstore and buy these papers. And I was always the same clerk. And after a while, she said, I think she thought I was crazy or something, because I would come in every week and buy like 2 or 3 of these. There was a lot of them around then. I think there's only one still around. But I would get them, and I would take these titles, and I would sometimes I would write a poem about the title, but usually I would attach the title to a poem that already existed, which did weird things to everything, right? So, but I didn't really know what I really wanted to do with it until I ran into a title on one of the headlines was "Child Sings in the Womb," and I thought, that's beautiful. But there was a beauty about these things, and certainly a very creative, very imaginative stuff. And the articles, of course, always quoted according to experts, according to scientists, etc. So it was they were delightful. And I still have, I've kept a lot of those, but I'm going to read some of those for you. The first one, this one I particularly loved, and it's called "Hubby's Sneeze Kills Wife When His Dentures Fly Out." So, we keep insisting that nothing has changed. The rhythmic flow of events hasn't really altered. The hollow coats hang in the closet like men who've surrendered without giving up. We excel at postponing what has already occurred. A thread hangs from a blue shirt like the river lines on maps, emptying a blue that isn't going anywhere. So let us celebrate the only weather we know. The brown clouds of stockings hang in the bathroom. Now, sometimes the titles are way better than the poems. So, let me read another one. Maybe the poem will be better than the title. Let's see. Scientist, 24. Okay, so this one is Scientists Discover herb, not herb, but that will make us immortal. I go dressed as a train that moves through the mountain when it is snowing. I go as a couple, she grows older in spite of his praise. I go as Heraclitus, no one looks at me twice. I go as an atomist, a Platonist, a planegenet. I go as a man who lives longer than planned, outlives his cough, accumulates doors. I go as a river that receives itself over and over as if it were the only one watching. And 20. Amazing story proves reincarnation. I expect the night to come in like a piano being pushed by 3 fat men. It doesn't work that way. I make the crossing at 9. The border guard asks the country of my origin, how long I plan to stay, why I'm here at all. The light from his flashlight flattens my passport, the face with the scratch. He searches my suitcase for satchels tied in knots. Routine, you understand. An official dark country crouches over his back. The things I prepare for never happen. I compliment the tidiness of his uniform, the gray dust on his gray buttons. In a gesture of compromise, he erases the country I step into. And the last poem I'm going to read from this section is one of the Child Sings in the Womb poems. I loved the title so much, I used it for 3 poems. And they're at the first poem in the section, first poem and the middle poem and then the last poem. And I'll read the last poem. And I want to dedicate this to my daughter, who's like 8 months pregnant. So this is like perfect. Child Sings in the Womb. The woman's body is a goblet, and the man is filled with a need to tell a story that is filling with their love. The deep sex sounds of giving birth, the deep sea sounds of giving birth. The man who doesn't know if he is a man or a woman. Into this weird world of everyday longing for miracles, he stumbles. When the child appears from the woman's body, the man says, "I've been waiting to talk to you for a very long time." And this is a poem from another collection. I'm going to leave Child Sings for a little while. And this is a poem dedicated to anyone who's ever taken a creative writing class, which I assume there are some of you here who've done that. And it's a poem about finding voices by losing your voice. Okay. So it's called Losing My Voice. For a group of cartoonists, I try out for a voice character. I'm supposed to be Captain Twinkle, and every few days I go in and try my voice on them. Captain's logger date, correction requester, captain's log date. But they are never entirely satisfied with my voice, and the cartoonists gather around me, everyone offering advice as to what I'm supposed to sound like. Joseph Goebbels with an English accent, a combination of John Cleese in Fawlty Towers and Betty Davis in All About Eve. Wally Cox as Betty Rubble. I'm confused. But I go back and work on my voice with a tape recorder and a script. When I was in creative writing classes in graduate school, the professor poet would encourage us to discover our voice, as if we were on a holy assignment. One day, this asshole who sat next to me wrote a poem everyone admired. They praised the authentic quality of the voice. I wanted to say, no, you're wrong. How can you say he's discovered his voice? If it were truly his genuine voice, it would sound like the voice of an asshole. When I was young, I ordered a book on how to be a ventriloquist. I kept trying to throw my voice into different places. I kept trying to speak without moving my lips. Nothing ever really worked. I go back to the cartoonists. They say, no, the character should sound like Richard Nixon playing the Wizard of Oz. No, you should sound like Michael J. Fox playing Hamlet. They seem to be frustrated. I'm in the middle of my voice auditions when my mother dies. Not my biological mother, my creative mother, my voice mother. Barbara Clarkson was the woman who showed me how to write through trees and starlings and crows and spoons. She was my first creative writing teacher, years before graduate school, years before the professor poet. Some of the others in the class called her Bird Woman, but she was Bird Poet, her words soaring in another element. In graduate school, I learned the following. 1, if you were an asshole, you could still write poetry. 2, if you were a white male asshole, you could write outstanding poetry. And 3, if you were an older asshole, you could teach poetry. I also learned that discovering your own voice was essential, providing it sounded like everyone else's voice. The graduate creative writing workshop was like being a part of a dysfunctional family. The most talented writer in the class was a woman who wove rather than wrote her poems. The rule was your work could not be identified as yours, and you couldn't say anything in defense of your poetry. The professor poet conducting the workshop interpreted all our poems in Freudian terms. I had a beaver in one of my poems. I lowered my head at his detailed explanation. In one poem we were considering, the professor poet was talking about a crack in a wallpaper as being a vaginal image. The Weaver poet, who had written the poem, though we weren't supposed to know it, said, no, it's just a crack in the wallpaper. That's when the professor poet threw down his books and the Weaver poet was never seen again in class. I go back to the cartoonists. They say no, the character should sound like Captain Kirk in drag. He should be a combination of the singer in Counting Crows and Toulouse-Lautrec. He should sound like a cross between Ed Sullivan and Vanna White and Woa Jehowitz from Barney Miller. I call Bird Poet's house to speak to her son. The Bird Poet's voice says, I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll be glad to get back to you. I say, Bird Poet, I miss you. I miss your energy, your genius, your inspiration. Please get back to me as soon as possible. At her funeral, they read a lot of poetry, and most of it is bad, except the bird poets. It is as if her poetry had been preparing for this moment, opening up like a beautiful death flower, each poem inviting us inside to suck in the juices, each poem needing us to suck the sunlight of death out of it. I once read how 2 Inuit women will chant so the sounds of each will enter the voice of the other. Each of them will sing in 2 voices simultaneously because the sound of one is echoed in the other's mouth. As a ventriloquist, I was a failure. I'd send my voice out, but it didn't want to go anywhere. Or I would send it out and it wouldn't come back. Maybe I should aspire to be a death ventriloquist, sending my voice out into a cartoon universe. Sometimes I feel I am only a voice on this existential quest through the galaxy, encountering ancient star civilizations, experiencing loneliness, despair, frustration. Then I say, oh, screw it, this is children's TV. They'll never understand. The bird poet taught me about voices, not voice. Unfolding, unwrapping, rivering voices, a connection, a current. I admire the cartoonists all day engaged in their whimsical world, made of string and pencil, lines, computer screens and drawing tables, spacecrafts and gadgets. There is no death in their dangling world, in their fanciful spaces. When I leave the bird poet's gravesite, I have a small leaf attached to the edge of my shoe, a tiny brown skeleton hanging with delicate rags, a skinny death cartoon. The myth of the voice quest was a lie that said we could send our voice selves out into a pencil-drawn universe, that we were alone and unique conquerors of silence, that we were ventriloquists imposing our voice on the world around us. But there is another way, to become reverse ventriloquists, receiving voices, to be voice woven, to feel in the air that is cupped in your mouth the presence of others. I want to apologize to the cartoonist for abandoning Captain Twinkle, leaving him in space, silent and afraid. I want to apologize to the professor poet for having given him respect. I want to apologize to the Weaver poet for having stayed silent. I admit it. I don't want to write poetry anymore. It is an addiction that has eaten me away. Am I speaking now? Am I moving my lips now? Am I releasing these voices to the rivers of me until there is no me? If I could, I would hold the bird poet's mouth to mine. Like an Inuit chantress, I would sing into her death mouth, and she would sing into mine. Oh, yes, I would say, in one of my many voices. Oh, yes, she would say, in one of hers. So, and how are we doing with time, George?
I haven't heard any drill. Do you not wear a watch?
It's I never have the right time on my watch, so this way I have no idea what's going on.
You actually have, I'd say probably another 5 minutes or so.
Another 5 minutes.
Q&A.
Okay, all right. So then I'm going to,
Give or
yeah,
take.
yeah, good. So I'll do this. Okay, this is about 5 minutes. So this is called Every City Has Its Wizard. It's about finding home. Okay, it's about finding home. All cities are the same city. Every city is the bone city, city of parables, city of hope. I don't sleep under newspapers anymore, Dave. I empathize, I care. Let me explain. I don't have a lot of experience with this stuff. During my last session, the doctor had me scream. He said, "You can scream now, and after you have screamed a long, fat scream, you won't have to see me anymore." I made the right decision. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a movie. I saw somebody say that once in a movie. The Jewel City, city of shattered things and amnesia, resurrection city, numb city, city of broken glass. Every city has its wizard. I have seen ours. He is the man on the TV who spray paints the bald spots of the bald men. He's our Michelangelo, painting halos on our aging archangels. In Cincinnati, I walk the skywalks between hotels and all the conference rooms that drifted over the city like clouds. It took me 2 days to see them, homeless people bundled and motionless like shrines among the ferns. City with dumpsters, medicated city, city of the starving. Later, I saw 2 homeless men, one called Dave, of course, and the other one was not called Dave. I said they could sleep in my room, not out of any compelling sense of humanity, more out of a sense of logic. I had an extra bed. All night, they watched CNN. If I were homeless and had a chance to sleep in a $135 a night room, I'm not sure what I would watch. I don't sleep under newspapers anymore, Dave. Baby born with angel wings, it's the words. I don't trust them. They sit on your skin. They seep into you all night. I want to wrap myself in music. There are many ways to solve the homeless problem. In San Francisco, they have an ordinance for shorter benches. In San Diego, they are talking about constructing narrower sidewalks. In Boston, they are arranging it to be winter all year long. Miami plans on exporting them to Cleveland. Cleveland is shutting down and moving to Mexico. When I was in Cincinnati, I was attending a conference on college composition when I came across these 2 homeless people. I was working on a presentation, praxis theory as a method of critical destabilization of text through a discursive reconfiguration of the rhetorical domain through cultural critique while historicizing the ethnographic constructivist semiotic deconstructed site of interrogation, while decentering authority and examining social construction of meaning, hypertextually and intertextually speaking, using paradigmatic knowledge to constitute discourse community. Yesterday, I saw a fetus bigger than a man in the Greyhound bus station. They kept opening his head and sticking things inside him. Yesterday, I saw this man looking for a wing, unwrapping the death of the world. In my conversations about this with the homeless men, I wanted to connect, so I said something about the homelessness of ideas, the homelessness of the heart, the homelessness of who we are. The one who wasn't called Dave asked where I was from. I said I was from Syracuse, and he said, sounds like you're the homeless one. And there was this music coming out of this kid's radio, wrapping itself around our feet. And I started dancing, Dave. My girl, angel of broken glass, angel of shattered things. And I started dancing, letting the ritual unwrap the pain. Yeah, eat the faces off the soldiers, eat the glitter off the gowns, eat the dance off the dancer. And I said to the men, so, what about spending the night in my hotel room? You see, I wanted them to like me. When we were in the elevator, there was this professor reading a journal. Dave said, what are you reading? And he stuck his face in the Chronicle of Higher Education. There's always got to be one that's sane. Give 'em our food, Dave. Here, give 'em our food. We can save them, Dave, if we want to. Satanist, chop-up dancer to make soup for the homeless. And I was feeling good about America and humanity and trust. And after I hid my wallet behind the toilet tank, I offered them some cheese and crackers. And there were these yellow crumbs all over the place. I felt as if we were in a movie. I slept under Reagan once, and I got trickle down all over me. I slept under Bush, and I woke up with 1,000 pointless lights. I slept under the star, and I woke up inside JFK's body. Light trickling out of the bullet holes. Why are you doing that? I'm unwrapping the breath of the world. Look, a dead baby. I told you not to do it. They'll see what's inside. The one called Dave turned on CNN. He turned it up real loud, so all night long the world crashed into our room. All night he unwrapped a ball of tabloid newspapers. You see, when you have two people together, one of them is always sane. But when you have three people, that's when it gets confusing. And I said, whoa. A street baby, a blood baby, a concrete baby, a nothing baby, a dream baby, a word baby, a bone baby. Yesterday I saw a fetus in the Greyhound bus station bigger than a man, and they were opening up its head and sticking things inside it. I think it's breathing. Did you see the words move? JFK's ghost lays flowers on Marilyn's grave. The other one sometimes danced a crazy dance as he hummed, my girl, the cracker crumbs falling around him, the rubble of CNN falling around him. His dance was crazy, like he was a character in a video game. And when they left about 8 o'clock in the morning, the one not called Dave said, I suppose you want us to thank you. And I said, you're welcome. Jesus. The skin is coming off. It's the wings. It's the wings. Yesterday I went into this storefront church. There was music inside and it was warm. They asked if I wanted to be saved. I said, okay. Then they put me in this icy water and wanted me to say, praise Jesus, hallucination. And I said, fuck it, I'm freezing. What the hell are you doing? We need something to keep us from flying away. We need something to keep us from falling out of the sky anymore. There's always got to be one that's sane. There are many ways to solve the homeless problem. New York City is putting razor wire on the grates. LA is charging property tax on cardboard boxes. This is the city where everyone is called Ezekiel. This is the city of enticements, the sacred city, city of crescents and halos and coronas. This is the city crouching behind a manhole cover. This is the city of crack people, the city of sniffing golden glue people, Salvation City, Bone City. Everyone in the city asks for change. I have seen the wizard of this city. I have seen him spray paint the bald spots of the bald men. During my last session, the doctor had me scream. He said, just like this, he said, you can scream now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there questions? Is this, I'm supposed to do this now? Okay. I have some answers. Yes, definitely. No, no way. No, but are there any questions?
No? Yes?
Your poem, the penultimate poem you read there about the different poets, it seemed to me to be autobiographical Can you talk more about the bird poet?
Oh, the bird poet. The bird poet was Barbara Moore Clarkson, and she has several books. Both of which, I love her work. She was so inspirational for me. It was an undergraduate class that I had with her, and I had an independent study with her, and I don't know where I would be without her, to tell you the truth. She was, I didn't know, I knew I just wanted to write. I had no direction in my life. I dropped out of school any number of times. I knew I wanted experiences. I did stuff, and that's what I wrote about. But she said, you need to go to graduate school. So she gave me a call out of the blue once and said, you've been accepted in the Syracuse University Creative Writing Program. And I said, what? She says, yeah. She said, I applied there for you. And I said, that's amazing, but there is a problem. I haven't graduated my undergraduate yet. And she said, get your ass back and get that degree because you're going to go to SU. So she means, like, I don't know what I would have done with my life without her. I'd be painting houses, which I liked, but yeah. I mean, I'd always be writing, but I had no direction to that writing. So yeah, she meant a real lot. Now, I won't tell you who the professor poet was. I won't tell you who that person was, but it's real. You know, yep. We're not on videotape. Yeah. And the woven poet, the young woman, and she was amazing. I think everybody in class learned from her, and I don't remember her name. I don't know whatever happened to her, And she was just so far above anything that we wrote. In fact, some of my writing, that woven kind of style of my writing, I learned from her, I mean, they weren't nearly as long, but yeah. So, any other questions? Yes?
A lot of scientific elements in your poems. I was wondering if you built around those ideas, built the poems around that, or if you added those in later.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I teach. I taught more at a science school, the College of Environmental Science and Forestry. So I was exposed to a lot, and still am exposed to a lot of science ideas. So they become they become integral to the work, I think, and they become part of the work. So it's not like one comes before or or it comes after. It's they get kind of inserted in the poem during that process. So yeah, but I like to do that. I like to work on a number, as you can tell, in a number of the poems, work with a number of different kinds of vocabulary simultaneously, or work on a kind of a roller coaster. So you think the poem is going one place and it winds up going someplace else entirely differently, and then back to that place and then somewhere else. And so, yeah, and science, I think, or reality, I use history a lot in other poems too. I use those very intentionally. So, yes?
I don't have a question, but I'll save the questions for tonight in class.
Oh, okay. Good.
I do have a comment, though. Dr. Calamaris told us not to miss this one, and I can see why now. I saw the emotions when you read about the teacher.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Amazing. And the imagery,
Yeah.
when the bald guy painting. I worked in New York City, and I'd go to the post office on East 77th Street, and I'd walk in and pray not to have to go to this guy that actually it looked like shoe polish. And I was always in fear of laughing at him when it's like, oh please God, don't let me go to him. But the imagery, wow.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. That's where I began, I think, in writing, was images. I just loved imagery. And then I learned I could actually say something with and use imagery, right? And that was a revelation, I think. So thank you for saying that. Yeah. And those bald guys with painted, it's the whole thing is that reality, is this facade, right, that we kind of create. And it's like, wow, why not go behind that reality? And homeless people, and that's a true story. And George and Marianne were there with the homeless story too. And it was in Cincinnati. I don't know, what year was that? That was a while ago. 92, I think you. 92, 93. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, and it was, so you'd walk from the hotel to the conference area, and there was a skywalk, and the first time you could walk through, you just walk through. And the next time it's like, wow, look at all of these people, all of these homeless people just sitting among the ferns, kind of. So they kind of blended in. And that night, there were two people, two guys, and they said, have you got some money or whatever? And I said, yeah, but I'm only going to give it to you if you use it for alcohol. So we sat there and we talked, and a lot of the dialogue is almost exact. I mean, some of the poetic elements that I use aren't, but the actual dialogue is very true. They did say, sounds like you're the homeless one. I mean, it was like all that stuff. And they did. They watched. One of them slept on the floor in front of the TV that was on all night long. We had a session the next day. And I thought, oh my gosh, this was getting kind of late. And so one slept on the floor, and the other in a separate bed slept not lengthwise, but across the bed. Never went under the covers or anything. Just so they were kind of uncomfortable in a bed situation. It was really kind of weird. And then when they did leave, they said, well, you can join us later, and we can go drink together. And I go, well, I don't know. I'm just not. That's not really what I want to do. They did say, I said, well, suppose you want us to thank you, and I did say, I said, you're welcome, or they said, well, I don't know how that went, but anyway, it was like, yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, and I did hide my wallet behind the toilet tank because I'm thinking like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I thought that when you told us the story next day. But what are you doing? What have you done? I mean, not that you can't be compassionate. It's just I didn't know you very well at the time.
Yeah, right.
And I thought,
right.
Really, is he making up this story?
Is he really crazy? No, it was. I learned a lot from that experience, and I'm sure they thought of me as just this weird sort of person. Like, why would he do this? And they did. And we were in an elevator. That whole thing is true, right? In the elevator, and some English professor. It was the 4Cs conference, right? Yeah. Some English professors there with the Journal of Higher Education, and the one not called Dave sticks his head right in the paper. What are you reading?
I think your reaction was a response to academia.
Oh, yes, it was.
And you're in
Yes,
you're
exactly.
in the tubes that take you
Yes.
across, and
Oh, yeah.
you're in the elevators. And
Well, there's got to be something real. You know what I mean? That's what both that poem and I think losing my voice is about, coming to some kind of reality. So.
But you did have the reality of that wonderful paper you were presenting. The title of which I can't quite remember for some reason.
it does go on a bit.
Yeah, there was a pretentiousness about conference stuff that everybody had their own, and so language, that kind of vocabulary stuff is like, come on, get real, and that's what those two gentlemen showed me. Mm-hmm.
I have a sort of question slash comment. I'm not sure if it's going to turn out to be a question, but something that I'd like to at least say, which is, it's interesting that when you talk about social reality, that you don't just remain on a realist level with it, but you embrace an imaginative level. And I'm thinking about some political poems. I mean, most poems are political
In some ways.
in
right.
some way,
Yeah,
because
right.
they're using language
Yeah.
or talking about language.
Right.
But your political slash social poems don't strike me as, some political poems can be reductive,
Yeah.
in that they only move on the explicit political social level.
Right.
Your political slash social poems move on more levels for me because they embrace the imagination. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really good lesson for all of us,
Right.
because you're sort of teaching yourself and learning about the
Yeah.
political and social realities by virtue of having your imagination interact with what's directly in front of you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that came across really strong, really clearly to me today in almost all the pieces you read. I mean, even in the Dearest Akeem pieces,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example,
Yeah.
with which you began,
Uh-huh.
because, and that almost dramatizes it,
Mhm.
because there the speaker is indeed interacting with.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think you're often talking about how, why, and in what way we interact with language,
Yeah.
how, why, and in what way do we allow the imagination then to
Mhm.
interact with the social political realities, if
Yeah.
any of that made sense.
Uh-huh, yeah,
No.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And there's I think you have to find, when you want to write about something that's political, let's say we all wanted to write a poem about Donald Trump. No, but we're complicit in so many of the problems that and if we don't embrace that, if we don't say, yes, then if we put ourselves up here and the problems down here and other people are creating the issues, no, because and so once you do that, I think you get to that imaginative, psychological, internal sort of connection to these things that you would not have if you didn't say, hey, I'm not separate from this, I'm a part of this, you know. And it's not then, because if you don't do that, what you're writing is really hypocritical and I think shallow, you know. So you really need to get right inside of what that subject is, and that you would do with anything, right? You know, political or relationships or, you know, emotions, etc. So, yeah. So, any other questions? The drills haven't started.
It's not exactly a question either, but when you were doing the voice or voices of the homeless men in the last poem, and you going up to the mic and you know, really inhabiting that voice, it made me think about. I know you do screenplays,
Yes.
but do you also
Yes.
teach playwriting?
Yes, and I teach playwriting.
Because there's something about the way that monologue,
Mhm.
that voice just became, I don't mean it as a bad thing,
Uh-huh.
theatrical, but
Yeah, oh,
it was
no,
theatrical
right,
in the
right.
sense of it being this very
Yeah.
grip, like you could just, it was just very gripping.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it was in a way that I don't ordinarily associate with poetry, but I was glad that it could
Yeah.
be part of the poem.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think of voice as being the most important thing we have. And my poems, I don't feel are alive until I actually share them through a voice with somebody else and to connect them in that way. So, and there's a performative aspect to poetry in general. I mean, a lot of poetry probably is best on the page, but most poetry isn't. I think most poetry is meant to be right out there in people's ears, you know, and that's, I think, part of losing my voice thing, you know, because part of that connection, that Inuit women, you know, that it's not just a one voice talking, it's voices coming together. So, yeah. So, anybody else? But I want to thank everybody, especially George, Marianne, and others that have returned from 11 years ago. Maybe I'll come back in another 11 years.
Thank you. You obviously go deep in your work, and you obviously want to bring that across and interact with an audience, so we really felt a part of it, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.